audio. It's working.
Okay. Hello everybody, this is the Reproducible build status update. We will be 7 people here. So this is Valerie, I guess you know most people, but some people don't know them. This is Valerie, Chris, Maria, Shimon, Vagrant, Stephen, and I'm Holger. And we are way more people who worked on this, and there's many people missing on these slides. So if you know a name missing, please tell us. We want to fix the slides afterwards and put credit where credit is due. Okay, what is...
Okay, so I'll give a brief introduction to reproducible builds. Probably most of you, or almost all of you, know what it is, but I just want to make sure everyone has a nice starting point. So what is the goal of reproducible builds? The first goal, or the motivating goal, is really to prove that binaries came from the source code that we think that they came from. And why do we want to prove this? Well, I think we all like free and open source software because we can trust what the programs that we're running have been produced by a community that we trust. We can inspect the code if we want to. We can change the code if it's doing something that we don't like. But we don't generally download the source code when we want a new program, and we especially don't download the source code when we're a user that is not also a programmer. Instead, we download the binaries. And the binaries could have been compiled not by a friendly Debian developer, but by a malicious actor who added secret code, or compiled it not from the source code we think it came from, but some modified source code. Or it could have been compiled by a Debian developer you do love and trust, but that their compiler is compromised and added some malicious code to the program anyway. And if you don't believe me that this happens, you can watch the beginning of any other reproducible builds talk that starts off with lots of exciting exploits and scary things that can end up on your computer. So how do we achieve this goal of reproducible builds? How do we prove that some binary that we've downloaded came from the source code that we think it came from? To do that, really the only way is to take the source code and recompile it and see if it matches the binary you just downloaded. But generally you can't do that for a lot of reasons. You can recompile the source code but get a completely different binary. That was the norm of the software world for many years, as I'm sure you're all aware. So, in Debian, to achieve this goal of reproducible builds is generally 2 branches of work, or I like to think of it as 2 branches of work. There's one, the first is the compilation of the binary program should be deterministic, and it shouldn't depend on, so it shouldn't be random, there should be no randomness every time you compile. But it also shouldn't depend on things that change constantly, like the time of the build, or like the host name of the machine that you're building on. So that's one area of work. The second is the build environment for any binary program or any binary package should be reproducible as well. So if you have a binary, you need to know some things about the build environment to reconstruct it exactly. And in general, we pass around binaries, but we don't know a lot of important information about the build environment. So this is solved by the build info file, which you've probably heard of, and other work in that vein. So, yeah.
Yeah, so the first rebuild of Debian was done in 2013 with the rebuild with the aim comparing whether the package is reproducible. There we were at 24%, and 4 years later at 94%. It was pretty nice. And while this looks very nice, first we are at 88% in SID if we vary the build path. But the other part, actually, that the tools to verify this in practice and not just on the random test side, these tools are mostly not existent yet. The workflows are not existing, and the build info files are only accessible to the Debian developers. So we are not at 95%, but rather at 50% or something. And if you want to check the progress, there's test-reproducible-builds.org, which was previously known as Reproducible Debianet, was still available under this name. There you find all these numbers, the tests, the statistics. If you haven't looked at it, there you find everything.
Thanks. So you don't necessarily need a tinfoil hat to care about reproducible builds. Say you can, or you feel like you can trust your tool chain, perhaps internally to a company perfectly. There are still some benefits to adopting reproducible builds in practice. For example, just demonstrate this through a few bugs that we've found. Here's one security bug. During the build, what it would do is generate a fairly random string, but it dumped it in under user share, under the OpenID consumer secret. That's the random ID there. Every installation therefore shares the same secret, even though different builds will have different secrets. So Debian was shipping the same private key to a lot of users. And I'm no security expert, but that's probably not very secure. That's in gbrowse. Then you get to sort of other, just random weird behavior. So what we were seeing is this manual page here. Sometimes it said usage of, and then sometimes we compiled it, it would say usage of, or whatever that really is. Yeah. And this happened in a lot of man pages, and so we knew it was to do with DocBook to man. Chris West, Forks, found the code in question using memcopy. I see people are already spoiling the joke. Under the memcopy man page rather explicitly says the memory errors may not overlap. And the reason it turns into an O is that you can check it out. It's kind of fun. Yes, you just change memcopy to memmove, all goes away. Although I needed to adopt that package and upload it. That's DocBook to man. You also get some rather silly things. Here's a package that fails to build from source 0.46% of the time. This is because the test suite, it's like a Python test suite sort of generator type thing, generating test cases. And this is like a random number, and it's testing the random number generator. So it's already a little bit dodgy as a deterministic test. So 0.46% of the time, it will generate a list that doesn't contain all of the elements because it will generate A, B, or something like that in its test. Anyway, the details don't matter, but yeah, and you could do the nice combinatorial maths, which we did. Yeah, that's Python parser. Yeah, it's pretty fun. Yeah. And we managed to find that. It just said unreproducible. Cool, thank you.
Okay, so now we'll talk about some updates from the last year of working on reproducible builds. We had a reproducible build summit in Berlin in December of 2016. And who attended? Not just Debian developers, but all of these various projects had people who attended, and I probably missed some. For some reason, we never made a complete list, but this is everyone that I remember. So we worked together for 3 days, collaborated on various, like, what does reproducible builds mean for all these various projects, and what can they get out of it, and how can we work together. So one thing that we did that we're all proud of, I guess, is that we made a definition, like, what does it mean for a build to be reproducible? So, well, I'll read it. A build is reproducible if given the same source code, build environment, and build instructions. Any party can recreate bit-by-bit identical copies of all specified artifacts. And if you go to reproduciblebuilds.org/doc/definition, all of these, like, slanted italic words are defined in more detail later on in the document. So that's cool. So now we all agree, all those projects, you can't disagree now. And other things that we did at the Reproducible Build Summit include talking about build info files for RPM, and we did a lot of cross-distro collaboration on things, like upstream package fixes and stuff like that. Great.
I guess this would be my part. So I'm maintaining currently up to 29 ARM boards, and then we also added an entire ARM architecture, ARM 64, thanks to CodeThink for donating some moonshot systems. Unfortunately, they're not running Debian, but in a lot of ways, it's good to test another distribution to see if there are variations introduced by running the host on Ubuntu. So that's great. So we've got 29 boards whirring away, and some of them we've newer ARM boards tend to be ARM64 hardware, and so we're experimenting with running a few builds with ARMHF to root on ARM64 hardware, and some of you may know that has some quirky issues, but we'll be working on sorting those out, and I think DSA is working on similar problems, and I'd love to chat more about that. And what other projects?
We also we got some more resources from Profit Bricks for AMD 64 and i386 testing, so it's a lot faster than last year. And we're working on more collaboration with more projects. So one example, Bernhard Wiedemann from OpenSUSE is very active now. He sends lots of patches upstream and also has set up a test environment to build SUSE twice, and we will share the results and present on Reproducible Builds.org. There's also the same coming from Geeks, F-Droid and Leader, but there's also other new projects like Intoto, Tails has been reproducible. So there's a lot of things which happened due to the summit in Berlin and in Hamburg, the recent one. One thing we also started in Berlin was the build pass thing.
So the 94% figure that Holger mentioned before, that is us testing whilst fixing the build path. If we run builds under different build paths, then the number drops down to about 79-80%. So it accounts for about 10-12%, maybe a bit more, of all packages that may or may not reproduce. So there are a few reasons why you might want to build under different paths, including to strip out part of the prefix of your build path, including privacy, running under parallelism, and to make it compatible across different distros if they don't have the same sort of stable build path setup, and to make it easy for users to build under their home directories. So there are lots of sources for this. By far the biggest source of this is debug info generated by GCC, because GCC is used as the main C compiler. It does have an option to strip out the prefix of the build path, so all you're left with is the relative path under the source root. So we've been experimenting with this for a couple of years. There have been like various hurdles. One thing was called DW80 producer, which is a debug info field that records the compiler flags passed into the compiler. And if we give -f debug prefix map to strip out the unreproducible prefix of the path, this unreproducible value will actually end up in DW80 producer in the final output. So some of it will be made reproducible, but then another part of it will be made unreproducible. So we sent in a patch to GCC to strip out this flag, and they accepted this patch. But now we've seen in other parts, in other build systems, they will unconditionally record C flags and so on into parts of the build output. So this is sort of like we're chasing things round and round in circles. Golang recently, Golang and Rusty have made progress recently. They have similar flags. We're sort of still starting off exploring this area. It remains to be seen whether they, they're sort of chasing this flag around and around will crop up in those build systems as well. To sort of stop this from happening, we introduced this new environment variable called build path prefix map. So it's very similar to the source state epoch environment variable that we introduced to lots of different pieces of compilers, build systems, and so on. So we wrote a spec for it, and we have written a patch with GCC to do this. Based on our tests, we have managed to make 1,800 packages out of about 26,000 in Debian reproducible under different build paths. So that's about 6 to maybe 7% of the total. Because it's an environment variable, a lot of people are like a little bit uneasy at doing this, because usually, you shouldn't use environment variables too much. It's usually best if you're controlling a program directly to give command line flags directly to the program. So at the moment, we're getting some resistance from GCC developers about this. The discussion's still ongoing, but sort of I think this particular environment variable is acceptable because it's not about giving extra information to GCC. It's sort of about taking away existing unreproducible information that it already has from the environment. So we'll see how that goes in the next few weeks. Golang and Rusty, with these options, they're probably going to be in the next couple of months the first reproducible compilers that we'll see. ever. So Golang, I was hoping, because I'm the maintainer of Rusty as well, I was hoping that Rusty would be first, but Golang kind of jumped in ahead a little bit in the past few weeks. So now we'll talk a little bit about reproducibility tools. So ReproTest, we have a tool called ReproTest. It was written by a GSOC student last year. The idea is you can give it an arbitrary build command. It'll run it with like varying the time, the username and things like that. Sometimes even the kernel personality. And then get the output and run DebConf on it. So you can use this to test your build processes. You can also run it under like virtual containers, so like an S-Truth or something. We're working on, at the moment it's very Debian specific. It relies on auto-package test code. We've been working on reducing the diff of it. At the moment we duplicate some code for various historical reasons, but we're going to hopefully deduplicate it. And then eventually make it distro independent. So we have someone working on getting it to work on Arch Linux, which I think will be really cool. So next up is DebConf.
So the DebConf is used when we have tested some things, whether they build reproducibly, and we found out they're not, so they're different. And we want to find out what exactly makes them different. DebConf is good for it because it unpacks archives and converts various formats to something that would be easy to read, and generates a nice output that you can read and find out what was the cause of unreproducibility. So there has been quite a lot of work on DebConf throughout this year. And for one very important aspect is that it now works much better on huge files with huge differences, like GCC size big files, and you can now control how detailed is the output, so it won't eat up all your memory for just displaying it. You can save the byproduct of DebConf as JSON file and then tweak around how the output looks and use it again. And there has been quite a lot of speed optimizations thanks to MB, who did it with via Tails, and so there has been very good speed improvements, like from 3 hours to 8 minutes, and there has been also a progress bar added to DebConf, so you won't get bored while you wait for these 8 minutes. We also added some ways to control how the DebConf behaves on different files, what files are getting excluded, and what's the maximum depth of container and packs. So you have now more control over how it operates. We have added some debugging, logging utilities, so you can see what's going on better. And we have added quite a lot of new formats that it displays nicely. So it now converts them all to something readable, something displayable, and gives them and shows you a nice output in the format you find usable most. So we also added output formats, so you can use whatever you like. There has been for HTML output there is a visual comparison of images of pictures that are parts of packages, so you can see what exactly is different, if there are some differences between them. So yeah, I haven't mentioned for a lot of things, but the work on DebConf goes pretty fast, and there has been a lot of small improvements in it.
So we have all of these tools for analyzing or testing for reproducibility of packages. Where we need to go from here is to, in Debian at least, actually prove that the packages we publish are reproducible and who has been able to reproduce them. We're producing build info files now describing the build environment of all .debs, all binary debs being uploaded to Debian. So it's possible to see now specifically which build machine, which developer built the package, and the environment in which the package was built. What that means, and this was the topic of my talk yesterday, using these build info files, it is possible now to attempt to rebuild the official Debian packages byte for byte. I expect this should work 94% of the time. The remaining issues we've already observed in the Jenkins test setup. Those packages, many of them do have patches available to make them reproducible. Where those have not been already applied by the maintainers, I believe Shimon has started to make NMUs against these packages, starting with the most essential, security critical or necessary packages as part of the build process, getting all of those reproducible. Yes, this is something that individual maintainers can also help with. Be extra careful now that you're building Debian packages in a clean as possible build environment. That's relevant for actual all packages if you build them on your own machine. Wherever possible, consider source-only uploads, and this will help ensure the archive stays clean.
We shouldn't make binary uploads illegal.
Yes, we should, and that leads into policy changes upcoming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have this bug, which is packages should be reproducible. And I've spoken here with the policy team quite a lot about what needs to be in policy to make this real. So we will say the packages should be reproducible. For that, we'll need to define reproducibility, which Valerie has shown that we have this definition based already. So we need to put this in there. We need to explain that it's a very controlled environment. So we don't expect that you can rebuild packages reproducibly everywhere, but in a clean CH root with the right dependency installed. We need to define that there's more, that also the build path needs to be the same, the build options need the same. And we also need to mention that for reproducing, it will need build info files, they need to be accessible, and there will be need to tools. And well, I hope this is doable to write this into a coherent text tomorrow even, assuming that we all agree, we as in Debian agree, that we want this in policy. That Debian is really ready for this now. It should be a normal bug, so if your package is unreproducible, it's a bug. But this is where we want to go. It's 1,300 packages which are failing this at the moment, but we had user share doc transition in policy when there were several hundred packages still having the documentation in user doc. So I would like to ask you to raise your hands if you think we should have this in policy now. Oui. Somebody really against that and says we should only have it in policy when there's 200 packages left or something? You can also disagree by writing to the bug.
Do it now at the beginning of the cycle.
Yeah, we want to do it at the beginning of the cycle, and it should. And Buster will not be reproducible. I would still think that there will be essential packages which are not reproducible. Or maybe it's just in the build essential, but it will still be a buggy distribution, but it will be a way less buggy distribution. Yeah, and the other thing we need to work on is really user interfaces. There's a bug for apt with a patch which you can try out today and add it to your apt. That apt will warn you if you install a package which is unreproducible. That we also need to fix sbuild and pbuilder, that you can rebuild packages in that way. And we need to distribute the build info files. This is all work that still needs to be done. So, how you can help?
Thank you. First thing, join our lovely team. Smiley faces and all this. And as previously mentioned, our team is much bigger than this, cross distribution, etc. So if you aren't necessarily in Debian, great that you're here, but please join our team, very friendly, etc. As a package maintainer, you check out your packages overview page, and there's a rep column which is next to the auto package test CI column, which will tell you very quickly which of your packages are reproducible or not. And then you can find out more details on tests.reproducible-builds.org. If you have any outstanding patches, etc., against your packages, please apply them and upload them before we NMU them, quite frankly. And push them upstream. It's probably usually easier for the maintainer to push patches upstream because there's already an established relationship there. You know what will be accepted or not. You can tweak it, etc. If you have some spare time, please have a look at our outstanding toolchain issues. So obviously fixing one package is very virtuous, but to be divine, you can attack the toolchain issues which will affect the reproducibility status of many packages at once. In particular, if you have Java experience, as in on the Java compiler itself, there's some interesting Java doc issues that many around there. There's quite a few in tech, DVIPS, and if you want to delve into the interesting source code of graph, there's an interesting bug for you there that will probably keep you entertained for a few weeks. Yeah, thank you very much.
We have two IRC channels, Debian Reproducible and Reproducible Builds, both on OFTC, the website and the mailing list. Please come with any questions you have, any help. And finally, we would like to ask our sponsors. So the Core Infrastructure Initiative sponsors the work of some of us, Vagrant, Jimin, Chris and myself, and Ed and Mattia, and our funding is only running till the end of the year. We need more funding next year. So if that's one part to do, and Profit Bricks and CodeThink for the hardware, plus Debian, there's more boards, more ARM64 boards coming, and thank you all for your contributions. We have time for questions.
First a shameless plug, tomorrow in my presentation. The reproducible builds are very important for embedded development as well, especially in the updates, but I'll expand on that later. But the question is, okay, developers both in Debian and outside of Debian, where can we go to find out how to make our software reproducible? What are the best practices, like best GCC compiler flags to be used and that kind of stuff? reproduciblebuilds.org/doc.
So, thanks for your talk. Are there any plans for source-only updates to new?
No, but this is FTP master territory.
Because that's sort of the only part that's missing for doing source-only updates. Uploads.
You can do source-only uploads today.
Not to new.
Not to new. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're right. I mean,
that would be good.
It'd be great to somehow relax that or work it out, so then we can just go completely source-only. Yeah, that's definitely on the radar.
Good.
Great.
Well, thanks to you all for this effort. I have a specific question because you said in DebConf you are using some visual comparison of images. How is this done?
Image magic.
Okay, and this can do some kind of, say, it's same, similar, or what? Magic. Okay. I trust magic.
Outline in the pixels that are different and making for GIF animation that also shows the difference.
Okay, so maybe I need to read the docs.
In your bug filing experience so far, have you received pushback against reproducible build patches or reproducibility in general, and if so, of what type?
So the most general response is just cobwebs and tumbleweeds. So that's 80% of the time the bugs somewhat go unlanguished until many pings. You may have seen some of them. Only a few maintainers have pushback in a big way, often to do with severity and things like that. But in general, no, not really pushback. Mostly apathy at the moment. And so, I mean, hopefully policy change will do that, and NMUs typically motivate developers, if I put it that way.
Could we maybe have a room show of hands? How acceptable would it be for you as maintainer if at the time of finding the bug with the patch, they would immediately upload to delayed 7? Yes? Good idea? Yes?
Can you ask again?
So at the time they found the bug with the patch for reproducibility issues, they would immediately upload to delayed /7. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing? Bad thing.
Delayed 10, maybe.
We have already announced that we will be doing this with delayed 15.
Reduce that.
So and if you don't like us to NMU, please reply to the bug. We will not NMU if you say no.
So you mentioned that there are 1,200 packages that are not reproducible, and you've sort of teased that there are some interesting things with GraphViz and other things. Are there other qualities that are common among these 1,200 packages that aren't reproducible, or are there any other juicy stories you can tell us about them?
I think the common thing is that they are harder problems. We looked at them and didn't find obvious things.
One thing we have done is categorized the areas of reproducibility. So we'll go through diffoscope reports and say, oh yeah, this is caused by a build path, or this is caused by GraphViz, which means we can then rank these issues by sort of severity or impact. So if one fixed this toolchain issue versus this toolchain issue, you'll make 33 packages reproducible. So a lot of this categorization is done already. The number of packages that are uncategorized is actually quite small. So, yeah.
So about DebConf, can you please clarify what the current status is? Because I seem to remember a previous release cycle when it was kept out of testing because it wasn't going to be security supported or too fast moving target. Is that still the case, or is there any stable interfaces that we can rely on, stable and so on?
I believe it was kicked out of testing because of there was a security issue with libarchive or something like that. It wasn't to do with ongoing
so that wasn't deliberate?
No, yeah, it was just like there was an RC bug in some dependency, so therefore it got
Okay, thank you.
This is a bit less of a question than it is a comment, but I wanted to just mention that this reproducible build effort, this is like a huge effort across all of Debian. It's touched the tool chain, it's numerous patches, it's needed an entire infrastructure, and it's just been one of the best run global changes to Debian that I've ever seen in the time I've worked on the project. I mean, I was a little slow to come around to the merits of reproducible builds by itself, but even before I came around to that, just how well the team has worked with the rest of the project made me want to help you, even if I wasn't on board entirely with the goal. So thank you very much for running an amazing project across Debian.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, seems like that's it. Thank you once again for listening to us, and hopefully you'll hear from us soon. Thank you.